Welcome to the IAC, and thank you for coming to this amazing artist talk with Beverly Leach, who many of you know, and Dana Lemmer, who you're about to get to know. We're so happy you're here. My name is Carrie Jackson. If you don't know me, I'm the director and curator here at the National Art Center. And yeah, today is going to be a treat. I'm going to let you know a little bit about who you're going to hear from today before they get started, and then we'll get to the good stuff, right? Well, first of all, thank you to Trojan Vision. They're making this live on Facebook. Thanks for anyone who's joining us on Facebook. And also to the IAC employees. We have several of them here. So thank you so much for all your help to make this possible. Also, you guys can come and visit this exhibit until January 14th. So you have a good amount of time to soak it up, especially after this this talk. You'll be able to understand a little more about her work. So just a little about Beverly. She is an artist, educator, beekeeper, and traveler. She began teaching here in 2008. She has been exhibited internationally and nationally. She's been at the Wiregrass Museum of Art 2 times, right? So you will find her work in lots of different collections. Very impressive list of people who have her collections, and we're just so excited to have her work up here as one of our professors to show the talent we have in our university. And Dana Lemmer is the executive director and the curator at the Wiregrass Museum of Art. If you have not been in Dothan, you definitely need to check it out. They do some amazing shows. She oversees the strategic vision, administration, artistic direction. I love her biography. I'm just going to read it to you guys. She specializes in building relationships between artists and institutions and works to build meaningful connections with the audience through diverse public programming. And like I said, they are constantly doing amazing shows. So you guys definitely need to check it out. She is a published writer and contributed to the publication Alabama Creates, 200 Years of Alabama Art. And she has curated independent projects focusing on various professional interests, including the underrepresentation of emerging and female artists, regionalism, and contemporary practice in the South, developing interpretive strategies through technology, creative placemaking as a catalyst in social and economic development. So we are here to hear from them, and so I'm going to hand it over and let them take over. Okay? Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Carrie.
Well, before we get started, Dana, I would like you to explain to my students in particular, or other students here, what is the role of you in our community as a curator?
Well, I think that varies for different curators, and also depending on the institution and the organization that you work with, particularly thinking about your audience and the public that you work with. For me, I think that my practice as a curator is a little bit more interested in building a bridge between artists and the public, rather than sort of interpreting the work on behalf of the artist. I think it's about creating space for the artist to talk about and share their own intentions for their work.
Great, thanks. I appreciate you being here today.
You know, I'm really glad to be here, and I appreciate the invitation, and Carrie, you know, you having me here as well. And Bev, we've worked together a number of times over the years and a number of different projects, both for your own work and exhibitions at our museum, but also programming and working with the community. And so I'm really excited to see this body of work. I recognize some of it, and I think we'll talk about that a little bit. But can you maybe start off just talking about this particular exhibition and sort of letting everyone know what this work is about for you?
Certainly. When I discussed having a show here where I teach with Carrie, I felt it was important that my students understood that I'm a multidisciplinary artist, and there's not just one particular medium that I've explored through, oh my gosh, 40 some odd years, no, how old? Anyway, I've been making art since I was like in middle school. So many of my students here, probably one of your strengths or hobbies you would do at home was doodling around, drawing, and you've been doing it in the bulk of your life, right? So throughout this timeline, I've experimented with many different ways to make imagery, materials that were often given to me by my parents. And I was in 8th grade and got my first set of oil paints, and we didn't have YouTube when I was in 8th grade. So you would just play with it like a toy, basically. And the funny thing is it evolved into a profession, but I think being an artist is a lifestyle one chooses. There are a lot of ways you have to manage prioritizing time and what you have that inner passion for. So I think for me, in my studio practice and the way I work, is a direct extension of things that I've been challenged by in teaching. So if my students are doing a paper mache project, well, I better figure out how to use paper mache. That's just one example, perhaps.
The title of the show, From the Hive, I think references beekeeping, which you are a beekeeper. And I think we see a lot of that imagery in this work. We also see a lot of other symbols and imagery. Can you talk a little bit about some of those kind of specific objects or symbols that you use, and why do you do that?
Certainly. Since moving to the region in 2007, I was an avid gardener when I lived in Maryland. And then when I moved here, and the only thing I can seem to grow in my yard is lantana, I gave up on gardening, and I thought the next best thing would be learn about bees. I thought bees would be easier than chickens. Things I learned about chickens, you had to bring them in at night and have a house for them, and you can't just leave them. So I thought, well, I'll be a beekeeper because it's close to gardening, it's close to nature, and one thing that ties a lot of my imagery together is my love and admiration for Mother Earth and the respect of nature. I love being outdoors. Beekeeping obviously is an outdoor activity. I don't have hives in my house. And as I learned more and more about the honeybee, native bees, and just ecosystems in general, what I found very powerful and inspirational was the bulk of the bees are females doing the work. Right? And I like the idea of us as humans trying to really cooperate and work together versus always at odds. So there's some kind of harmonious unit that all these individuals within a beehive come together for a common good. So there's something very aspirational, inspirational, connected to nature, perhaps more about mothering and nurturing. And then just the whole life cycle of the bee, it's not unlike other insects and insects that go through metamorphosis process. So that symbolic idea of transformation. Mm-hmm. So all of us as humans have this ability to think deeply, make changes for the good of culture or society around us.
Do you think that using imagery like the bees and the birds, the goddesses, like these repeated images, does that play at all into the kind of material that you're using or the mediums that you're working with? Sometimes.
One of the benefits of beekeeping, other than the honey and being outdoors and all that, is the beeswax. And there's a long ancient history stemming back even before Egyptians, but most reference points in art history start with Egyptian encaustics. I was checking with Dr. Holder if I had that right. and so I have a lot of beeswax. And I like working with wax as a medium. Zenko, who had a show ahead of me, that's one of his primary mediums, encaustic. And I felt it lent itself well to mixed media assemblages because wax is extremely versatile. You can add pigment and use it as paint, but then you can use it as a substance in and of itself.
So this piece behind us, I think, really combines a lot of these ideas, right? The birds and the bees and the goddesses. How did this piece come about?
I took a course this summer in ancient mythologies that revolved around matriarchal systems. So the history of the evolution of the goddess from a Jungian perspective. That's as far as I'm going to go with that. The book was rather dense, like 1,200 pages, and it was a weekly reading group. So one thing I would say to my students about being an artist, it's a process of always learning and always researching. And the excitement about art history is it's a reflection of human culture through vast amounts of time. So it was a study group / book club. I hate to say book club because now it makes it sound trivial, but it was pretty dense. And there was a lot of stuff I had to look up. And even though I was interfacing with scholars from all over the globe that were part of this Zoom discussion weekly throughout the bulk of the summer, I had learned from other people and through reading. The book is written by Anne Benning, It's the evolution of the history of the goddess. And it excited me in a way that perked my interest in trying to make something different. So obviously with collage, I could look up images of the goddess and cut goddess images out and add butterfly wings. And again, wings, butterflies, birds, they can ascend to the heavens, skyward, and think of all that symbology. What I just said, even saying heaven, is very symbolic and meaningful to people, right? Mm-hmm. And part of this work is exploring a deeper question, meaning and questioning we have as humans, right? On a more, I'm avoiding the word spiritual plane, but darn, I can't think of a different word to use suddenly. So this piece evolved from that class as my final project in a class. I think my students can relate to that. Mm-hmm. I wasn't sure. A lot of people would do research or presentations. There's a variety of ways you can discuss these ideas. And it was a community of artists and poets and writers. So some people did visual solutions for their final project. And one of the aspects of this reading group, study group I was part of, people wanted to understand how to make their own Paleolithic goddess, like how to pick up clay and form it in your hands. And that's what a lot of these background images are. And like half bee, half woman in epiphany, and like a realization there's something more than this material human body. So after we did that, I thought, yeah, I'm going to use paper clay. Some of my students know I was a big proponent of that when I taught time and space. And I just started making goddess figures, putting them within the shadow boxes to tell a long story of matriarchal power.
I love that this came out of, like you wanting to kind of further your learning and your education. And I think that, there are other pieces in the show too that came out of like a similar networking opportunity. And so I know that that's something that you do a lot in terms of connecting with artists really across the world. Why do you think that's important? I think for you specifically, but for artists in general.
Well, for me specifically, it's fed my studio practice. It's one thing for me to come into a classroom, set up an assignment, set certain goals, and how am I evaluating young people to grow into artists. But how do I stop from hitting a plateau? Like, this is what I do, and then this is what I do. And how do I do new or different? Or how do I keep my own personal interest? So I think the body of work really reflects my own Hive mind. So I'm thinking of Hive as a hub of activity. You hear phrases like busy bee, hive of activity. And I also stretch my own studio practice with different materials, A, through teaching, and B, it holds my own personal interest. And there are lots of experiments that don't always work. I'm trying to glue this, to use that, to make that, and that doesn't always work. So it's A, you have to have passion to devote the time to it. And only other artists understand the amount of time and sacrifice of other things you do to make your studio practice. So the networking you're talking about, well, yeah, Instagram, I've met a whole international group of artists through the medium of collage. Mm-hmm. And there are collage artists internationally doing deep scholarly research. Collage right now is kind of where photography was perhaps 80 years ago. Collage isn't thought of as a high art form. All right, it's like, oh, that's collage. That's not as important as painting or drawing or video or something like that. But there is a group of artists trying to elevate that internationally, where museums start having it in more of their collections. Mm-hmm. A point of reference for the history of collage in particular would be Dada. And if you think of the paper ephemera that we are slowly losing in the digital age, it's just another way to collect imagery and build a different vocabulary, and holds my interest, because basically I need a lot of stimulation, I guess.
Well, so we were talking earlier about collage. And I think, you know, you have a lot of different types of materials that you're using here, different like artistic processes, but we kind of landed on this idea that collage was sort of the starting point for a lot of that. And, you know, one thing that I always like to ask artists is how their work might be informed by living and working in the South. And you're not originally from the South, so I'm curious if and how your work maybe has changed since you did move to the South in 2007.
The rich history of storytelling in the South has had a deep influence on my work, and I never really thought about myself as a storyteller. But then I even realized in educating and talking about art, it's a visual representation of many different kinds of stories. And this rich heritage in the South in particular with people like Catherine Wyndham Tucker, or you listen to Charlie Lucas talk about his work. Many artists that are self-taught have a huge narrative related to roots of storytelling. And if you think of ancient civilizations, before books, maybe even before it's written in stone or on a clay tablet, it's all oral and all storytelling. So there's something within the human psyche that remembers the patterning and cadence of these stories that are passed down. So I never thought of myself as a storyteller, and as I'm looking around at my own work, and oh my goodness, we could be here the rest of the semester. I could go in deep detail of every story going on in my head. And it might seem kind of like collage-like or disjointed because there's multiple ideas. And it's not important to me that you all understand my particular story I'm trying to tell. I want you to bring your story to it. And that's more important to me because I know why I'm doing it. And it's not important to me that the viewer deeply understands my rationale. I want them to have a personal experience.
Can you talk a little bit about the connection between your collage work and your assemblage? Because we've had that conversation, and I think it's very similar.
Well, what had happened in my studio practice, when I first moved here, I was exploring photography more. I was still getting my studio set up and, I don't know, finding this whole new chapter in my life, a whole new transformation. This is my second career, not my career prior to that. I was in graphic design, and in some ways graphic design is storytelling, just for a product in a different kind of way. And I started to go to many flea markets, and I would go to this one particular flea market, Sadie's, where there'd just be tables and tables and tables full of stuff. And then within the camera lens, I was using a 35 millimeter SLR camera. We didn't have even the iPhone things we have now. So anyway, I'm looking through this kind of lens. Photography people would know exactly what. So you just start cropping and seeing relationships of shapes. So every table was like this new composition. So I just did tons of photos, and then I started to buy things because, you know, they're under $1. They're like a nickel, a quarter. And then they had to have a certain look. And then I thought, I'm going to paint with knickknacks. That was the whole goal. And I thought it was unique until I started realizing many contemporary artists, especially Nick Cave, was doing this kind of thing. And then I wanted to figure out, well, how do I chip them apart, reassemble them? And I started to do three-dimensional collages or mixed media assemblages a la Rauschenberg, but maybe not that avant-garde. And I was just playing around in my studio. I didn't really have any goal in mind, and I had time because basically first year I moved here, I didn't have a job, so it was okay. Again, time management, what am I going to do? And so I noticed with these assemblages, it was very much a collage process. And then I realized that ever since undergraduate school, I'd always done collage. A lot of the work in my sketchbooks was not just drawing or note-taking, or I ended up saving paper ephemera. And it would be just like a 2D basic assignment, like here's this piece of paper, here's that piece of paper, here's that, and a la abstract expressionism or something. So I never realized until I started going back to collage that it's a process I had always undergone. And it was just always been an integral part of my studio practice along with photography.
Much of the work in the show represents the female form. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. Come on, right? So there's a huge dialogue and a huge shift in art history now. Katie Hassel, okay, hi all my female student artists, right? A podcast for you is Katie Hassel's The History of Art Without Men. I'm not even going farther. I think I said it all in that sentence. I know the truth hurts, but women, it's our time, it's our moment. We had Barbie. I tied that in after all.
I watched it last night. How does teaching inform your studio practice? And I think beyond that, does your studio practice inform your teaching?
Yes, on both counts. I'm going to address, well, first, a lot of times when I am planning an assignment, especially if it's more hands-on, especially when I taught time and space, I basically had to go through the assignment because 3D was not my thing. It's so funny to sit here and look at all this. But it excited me to overcome the challenge. Okay, my students can relate to this. You're in class, your teacher gives you an assignment. The assignment is to glue this wood together, sand it smooth, paint it shiny, and make it look good. Perfect craftsmanship. Okay, maybe that was not my forte when I was 19. But I had to figure it out, so through teaching, it made me revisit maybe some of the weak spots in my own undergraduate training. But then, when I had to teach Intro to Drawing, I thought, when was the last time I just did a drawing? And when I mean drawing, it could be pastel, charcoal, pencil. You can draw with a brush, but I mean not a liquid medium. I just mean, that. And it took me a year before I got to it. So when school let out in May, I'm like, okay, I'm going to do pastel drawings. My Intro to Drawing class does pastel drawings. I take photos of the sky every day because that's part of my ritual. Walk the dog, look at the sky. I am going to do drawings of clouds. Yep, I'm going to show my students I know how to draw. And that was pretty much what happened on that wall back there. And you know what I want to do? Don't be mad. I really just want to stay home and draw.
I think that's so interesting, though, to think about the evolution of your work, the materials that you're using, the processes. And, I mentioned earlier, I recognize a few of these pieces. Can you talk a little bit about how some of the work itself evolves for you and changes?
Okay. I think what Dana's getting at is how does one document an existing work?
Hopefully.
And no, we got digital. It's documented. Mm-hmm. Dana's a curator, hates hearing this. So there might be a couple pieces in this room right now that have had 3 different lives that are documented because maybe I've used the same substrate over and over.
You use an existing piece to create a new one.
Create a new piece. Now, the problem with that is then you don't have a quantity of work, right? Because it just lives digitally. I mean, I'm not against the digital world, but sometimes you like the physical stuff to actually have. I'm not sure why I did that. I think I just didn't want to start over from scratch and go buy another door, coat it with all the wax and the paint. And
well, artists have to do that sometimes.
Well, sometimes there's twofold reason. Again, students will really get this. You might not want to spend the money. Mm-hmm. And 2, where am I going to store it? This is a really good, so I had a student in printmaking ask me once, what do you do with all this work and how do you store it? And I said, well, when I order paper, I have these big paper boxes. I mean, if I wasn't cheap, I'd probably buy some flat files. Anyway, it is an issue. People who are sculptors, that always blows my mind, unless you have a giant barn where you store. I mean, it is part of an artist's life. If you haven't sold it, it's not in the museum collection. Where are you storing things? How do you, and this is huge because you need to save your legacy. I think artists now, because we can digitally archive everything, we all have a website, Insta, whatever we're doing, but I don't know if that's best practice, okay? I'm telling my students, don't start recycling stuff. Hang on to everything. Don't throw anything away. Don't throw anything away.
Or at the least document it.
Well, no, don't throw anything away and document it.
So a lot of the work here explores different mediums and different media. Why do you like to work that way? You're combining different things, especially, you know, incorporating the digital media, which I had forgotten you've been doing for a while, because that piece used to have a video component.
That's a third iteration. It's called Waggle. I'm going to keep it that way. I'm not going to change it again. But it used to have a digital picture frame attached that actually had video of the bees doing their bee thing inside a hive. And then in one show I had a projector mounted into the ceiling, and then I projected a giant bee, and people would freak out because you'd hear the zzz, and you'd have to walk through the bees. And I understand how people are afraid of bees, but they don't, it's live and let live. They're not going to sting you unless you're trying to steal their honey or you're stepping on them or whatever. And not all bees sting and blah, blah. Anyway.
Why is it important to incorporate technology and new media into your work?
It intrigues me, A, because my students hear me say this a lot. Yeah, I sort of hate the computer, but at the same time I love it. Right, and I do like teaching analog because I'd like to have a lot of different experiences. And I think we are creatures of the zeitgeist. We're in this moment in time. But because I've always had to use the computer, and I've always had to learn it on the fly. So when I started as a graphic designer, it was old-fashioned, all hand-cut everything. I think that's the other, to backtrack back to collage, I used to be a lithographic stripper. I know they all just heard the other part. But I used to always have to cut out film and make masks with an X-Acto knife. It wasn't digital. So I'm still of that old school generation, but not so old school that I'm a Luddite and say, oh, bad computer. And actually, in my digital drawing class yesterday, I said, hey, do you know Adobe? You just type in 3 words in Illustrator and it'll make some vector art for you now. So whatever this AI thing that we're going to have to deal with, it's here to stay, and we're going to have to figure it out as artists.
Yeah, we probably don't have enough time to talk about
No,
AI
I should have said AI, but it just rattles around in my head. So when I made the analog collages, especially the screen there, I have an app on my phone. Oh, this sounds like, I don't know what it sounds like. Anyway, it has all these preloaded digital effects, and I could take my analog collages and just add digital effects. But it seemed to me to add to the story of stars, space, infinity, cosmos, consciousness. So to me, the effects added to the narrative of the collage. So it wasn't just I stuck stuff on, because you have to have strong rationale. And again, that storytelling. So the prompts through social media, all those collages that are in 6-inch circles, a lot of my students do Inktober people. And anyway, it's Februarlage. So in February, it's collage month. You only have to do 28 versus 30 or 31. But I just got into it. I just had my whole workspace set up and just started doing it. And you'd have a prompt like atomic or fish or shoe. And so it's like solving a problem. It's just like when a client comes to you and they need some kind of logo designed or print ad, and you have to go through the problem-solving process. Students hear that all the time in graphic design. What I want people to really understand, you are an artist, all capital letters, bold, underscore, and it's all the same process. It doesn't matter what your materials are, it's what your brain invents. And the computer, at least what I know about AI now, is not taking over my brain, is it? I don't know.
Maybe.
I hope not.
What do you hope that people get out of your work? Like, when people come and they see this exhibition, what do you hope that they leave feeling or thinking?
I hope they're inspired. It's okay if they're a little confused. I kind of like that. That would be kind of like, they're like, is this all the same person? What's going on? That would be okay. But above all, maybe they feel like making something on their own. You know, maybe they're like, wow, I never thought art could be this way. Oh, I have some old clock part thing I can make into something. So maybe they're inspired.
Do you think it's important for artists to experiment?
Oh, definitely, most definitely. I think especially contemporary artists, because you're more or less your own free agent. You're finding your own path. It's not like in the Renaissance where the church is going to hire Michelangelo to do the Sistine Chapel and there's an expected style. You have to do it the way the Pope is telling you. No, that we're not confined that way, because there's other ways we can seek out, dare I say, patronage or sales. Or I think most artists I know that work now, there's many different hats we wear, and we use our skill and thinking and inventiveness and curiosity and creativity in a myriad of different ways. I think what's important is you just find your own rhythm. And what I found through Instagram and that international collage community is just another way to have a prompt that makes me want to make something.
Do you have any advice for young artists in
particular?
particular?
Just to keep making it and quit. Quit making excuses why you can't do things. Just do it. I know that sounds like a Nike commercial, but the minute you say you can't, oh, I can't draw, I can't do this, I don't have any money. Yes, you can do all that. Just figure it out. Because the minute you say you can't, you've put up the roadblock. You see what I'm saying? And that's true of anything in life, any field. When I read about people who write, hi David, writers are very disciplined, and they get up in the morning and just do it. They don't know if all the words they've written are going to end up in the novel, that end up in the article, that end up as a Pulitzer Prize or something. You just have to do it. I know that sounds trite, but I think what's hard on a student is you get a lot of societal pulls, you know, friends, peer pressure. Maybe your parents don't understand what this art gig thing is, right? And you get all about, oh, I got to make money, I got to make money. I'm not saying you don't, but you have to shuffle a lot of things around and just think creatively, and it does all fall into place. It truly does.
It takes practice.
It takes tons of practice. And when I teach, almost every time I'm in the classroom, I can't put myself in their shoes at 19, 20 years old, thinking, oh, I scared all my professors. I was afraid of everything, you know, oh, what's my future? Because that's what every 20-year-old person is saying, what's my future? If you just trust in yourself and just do it every day, you can't skip doing it. That's the other thing that's hard, because other things get in your way. Oh, I got to go to my barista job. I got to flip the hamburgers. I got to do whatever. My teaching gig gets in the way sometimes. Great, that is a good thing to put on Facebook right now. I'm just saying, it's all about time management. And because my kids are raised, and because my husband is my #1 supporter, when I'm in my pajamas for 72 hours at a stretch, are you ever going to come out? Meaning I'm back in my studio just making things. So you need people that understand and get you. Now that sounds like an eHarmony ad I just saw. People who get you. I'm sorry, I don't mean, it just seems like I have all these cliches. But you just have to surround yourself with like-minded people for your success. And find the people that feed your soul, that understands you need solitude to get the work done.
I did want to talk also about this idea of found objects. We've kind of talked about the history of storytelling in the South. We've talked about found objects. You use a lot of found objects, both from your personal life and your history, your family, but then also things that you collect along the way. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
Well, sure. Many artists, through just studying art, I've always been attracted to the work of Robert Rauschenberg. Pops right into my head, and some of his pieces with taxidermy. I have several dead birds in my freezer that are going to turn into something someday. Well, no, I know that sounded gross, meaning the discards of our everyday life. I probably shouldn't have said the bird thing. But to repurpose objects to give them new life in this very materialistic, consumeristic society that we inhabit. Okay, so when we're talking about recycling, what a better way to recycle things like that satellite dish that now contains a divine goddess. I just find it fun. Fun sounds trivial, but I find it exhilarating, and I have looked at other artists who work in a very similar vein. Contemporary artists are exploring that, whether they're doing it through the fabric arts we were talking about over lunch, or whether we're doing mixed media assemblages. The frame right here to your right, my neighbor was throwing that frame out. It was like right across the street. It had a broken mirror in it. I'm like, oh, I could do something with that frame. So having space in an area where I can store things, I mean, I have stuff, and it sits around for a while until other stuff finds it. So what I have going on, I have a basement area for a studio. Sometimes I use the carport, and then I have a whole spare room, and then the guest bedroom. So I have areas around my house where I can stage projects, and then there's multiple projects going on at the same time. So this primary body of work, except for 2 pieces, is really over the past couple of years. It's since 2020. Well, I said that, but this is the year before 20. I mean, the background of it, but all the goddesses. And I'm just saying, it's kind of, again, with other commitments in life, you have to find pockets of time. And I find staging the work and living with the work. Some artists like to have an off-site studio. Like, I'm going to work, here's my art brain. No, my art brain is my hive. It all has to be around me all the time. That's the best way I work. So everyone works differently. It's like a writer might have their writing shed that they go to. For me, I need my whole house to be like my studio. And my husband's super cooperative. It's awesome.
Is that a challenge for you, though? Like to start something, to walk away, to go back?
No,
I assume
no.
the work changes.
It does change, because what you have to do, and I say this in classes a lot, I like it when the students work for a few hours, get away from it, do other things, and come back. Because when you come back to the work with a fresh perspective, you see something that could be improved that you didn't see before. You know what I hate? Is when students stay up all night the night before. Because then you don't have the time to process and analyze it.
I think the whole faculty probably hates
that.
that.
I know, every student just is like sad right now. Oh, I can't believe she called me out on that. But I get it, because I get how time management is. But I like living around it all the time. Every artist finds their path and finds it. I find it's because of the way I have to break down pockets of time. I like having it around. For instance, because I get up real early, I could crank out a collage, then go to class, then come home and finish the other collage I didn't start. Oh, and then maybe do that grading or whatever stuff you do to teach. You know what I mean? So I can find the pockets of time to be productive. What I get sad is when life, other responsibilities get in the way, and I haven't even walked into my studio room for 2 days. You see what I mean? I'm like, whoa. Or I go through periods where I've cleaned everything up to start a new body of work, like when I did all those pastel drawings. Not only did I have to clean up the whole studio to find room to make them, then I had to clean up all the pastel dust that like covered everything. So I can't wait till school's out so I can make more drawings.
That's great. You may not want me to ask this, but it's not what you think. Your background is, and your foundation is really in printmaking, and so can you talk a little bit about this body of work and how you connect that maybe with printmaking or not?
Well, I don't think the body of work is directly connected to printmaking, but this just came up in class the other day, where a student said, this is a lot of process, like in that forlorn student way, like, oh my God. And I'm like, yeah, art is a process. So when I was at Columbus College of Art and Design, I gravitated towards printmaking because I liked the professors, I liked the art we were talking about, and those professors were also photographers. Somehow, because the darkroom has always been near photography, I have no idea why this was, but I've always been around photography in the darkroom in these processes. And I remember in high school, my primary high school teacher, I had two, but my primary teacher that I gravitated towards was a photographer, and we had a darkroom. So I was always oriented towards steps and processes, because anyone who's done film negatives, photography's, I mean, analog photography, it's a huge process. So I've never, I was not going to tell everybody I've never considered myself a draftsman. Thank you very much. But that's all part of the story, is I gravitated towards process because I needed, I guess I've always felt drawing was intimidating. Okay, who's felt that way? Come on. Now, I mean to draw realistically. I went to art school, which was art boot camp. I had to draw Dana Lemmer to look like Dana Lemmer. And trust me, that's a lot of hours of practice to get it all down. It isn't that I can't do it, but I know people can do it better. Let's just say that. But I gravitated towards painting. And then painting can be very process-oriented. If you're working with oils, you can't do it all in one fell swoop. It's layered, this. So it's something about the process. Also, when I was involved in oil painting in my undergraduate years, I liked rabbit skin glue, layers of my own ground gesso. I mean, I was really into that process. So I think to connect it all, when you look at all this body of work, it's all about process and stages. And I'm very process-oriented, even though I'm not, quote, I have this print idea in my brain that I might do over the break, maybe, but anyway, to me, it seems like a whole natural flow. But I understand from an outsider's point of view, it doesn't make visual sense because you think of photography as one thing, pastel drawing is another thing, and sculpture is another thing. So I can see in a viewer's head with material, they seem like different things, but they're really not.
So I know we want to leave time to ask questions. My last question is, what's next?
Thanksgiving. I do want to, I have a whole group of photos I've set aside. Over my Christmas break, I have a whole bunch of drawings I want to do. Over Christmas break, I want to travel this summer. I didn't travel last summer. I think travel is important. The other really exhilarating thing about studying art, as you get the opportunity to save money and travel and go all around the world and go to all these museums and just see the things you've studied, it's like, wow. It's just wow. Art is great. That's all I can say. So, wow. I'm going to leave it there.
Okay. Well, I think we can open it up if any of you have questions. Don't be shy.
Okay.
Well, thank you for your presentation. First, I want to thank you for using a German word, Zeitgeist, because I'm teaching German at Troy University.
I was also looking at you thinking of writers in the library, so I thought you'd dig that too.
I wanted to ask you, how much do you think about where is the boundary between art and the world, or art and life, right?
Whoa! Now we're getting into some cosmic consciousness stuff. Okay, no, that was a cool.
If there is a boundary, or where? I just wanted to ask you, how much do you think about that?
There are two things I think about every day: that boundary, and death. Those are two things I think about every day. Something about turning 64, but I was thinking about death before. But I'm thinking about death right now. But when I am up in the morning, the first thing I do, our bedroom windows face east. I like to see, where are the stars, where are the planets, when is the sun coming up? All of that is art. Maybe my observational powers as an artist, right? So when I'm watching how the light affects the day, I'm like in a giant James Turrell universe. If you all don't know who I said, Google it. You all got Google in your pockets. And so to me, there is no boundary. So for me as an artist, it's I don't even want to say identity, it's my lifestyle. Which, do my kids when they were younger get that? Not necessarily. My husband's always got that. It's interesting. It's just, it's somehow, so to me, I don't think there's a boundary. So, okay, if I go into a Gothic cathedral and see beautiful stained glass windows and experience that light, but then the whole history involved with that, or if I'm just on the church in the corner with their architecture or their stained glass window, it's how you perceive the world. It's thinking. How do you perceive it? I hope that answered your question. Dana's here to keep me from rambling.
Well, I don't think I did a very good job.
No, you did great.
I think I asked a couple off-topic questions.
She was not supposed to ask me about printmaking.
Any other questions?
Sure, Ricky.
What's your favorite piece from this body? Like favorite to work on or just your favorite outcome?
Favorite to work on. Okay, I'm sorry, this is taking me a second because I like the question. And I'm going to say my favorite to work on has shifted. Right now, I'm all about those drawings. I really just can't wait to get back to do more. This hummingbird piece, okay, maybe it's too pretty, but I really loved working on it. And part of me, you know how I hate the word cute, right? So in my head, oh, that's way too pretty and way too pink, right? But I really like it. Ha, ha. You know why I don't want people to do cute? I don't want you to copy other cuteness, right? So I see sometimes in a class, oh, I like this character. I'm going to say Sonic the Hedgehog because I can't think of any character. And then you draw Sonic the Hedgehog. Don't do that. Invent your own. I mean, I know you guys have taken me to task a lot about that cute word. But sometimes I've been afraid to let my work be pretty because I don't want to be a pretty girl. That's to me is pretty, and I can't wait to put this up in my living room. I can't wait till it comes home. And I can look at it every day. But this is really not what I would normally do either. That's a little closer to what I think of myself as what I would normally do. I don't know. I might have rambled there on that answer. Hi, Malia. Hi, Sherry. Good to see you.
You mentioned that constraints have changed. Like in the past, perhaps artists felt constrained by their patrons. What do you think are the main constraints on artists in contemporary times?
I don't know. If, I can maybe only answer it from my teaching here, and I'm afraid that a constraint that is that AI is going to replace artists. Are you okay? Okay, my oldest son, who's 40, is in that sweet spot of where they're embracing AI to take over all the white-collar jobs. As I'm doing this talk tomorrow, he's at an international conference for AI. He works for Hearst Publications. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is I still think artists in all disciplines, theater, dance, writing, right? We're going to need this. I don't think, no matter how much you're going to put us into the zeros and ones, I don't think it's going to replace us like in The Matrix or that Tom Cruise movie. I don't know is the problem. And I'm trying not to be afraid of it, but when I almost had a knockdown, drag-out argument with my son about this whole future and direction, and he's like, well, artists are going to be obsolete. But I can remember when he was in high school, ooh, artists are so cool. I want to be like you, and I want to draw and paint and be an artist. Are artists not cool anymore? I don't know. I don't think my computer is all that cool. I just think computers can do things for us that might free us up to be more creative. I hope I answered your question. Somehow I thought of my son, AI, and my head exploded.
There's one back here.
Hi, Ophi, yes.
Hello. I was wondering if you had any advice for us young artists and students who are graduating soon and opening up themselves to careers in the future.
Oh, well, there are lots of good careers. One thing for a lot of you that are graduating, I would seek out local museums, volunteer. I know you know that. I know Ophi knows Dana. But there's always a lot of opportunities to collaborate in the community at large and get your name out there. And, oh, this will sound so marketing, networking. But it's an important part of it. And I know there's social networking, but you have to physically be present too. And the other best advice, there's this book called Art and Fear. I think it was written about 2 decades ago. But my takeaway from it, and the best thing I think students can do, this is what's going to happen. There's this huge shift. Suddenly you've gone off the cliff. Where's my art community? Because right now you got us, your art buds, your other family, right? And then you leave this environment, go wherever it is you are going to go, and then you're like, oh, you got to put yourself out there. So when I moved here, I I was happy to escape the dark arts. Am I allowed to say that out loud? And B, I knew I was just going to find a museum and hang out and figure it out. I wasn't sure I'd have this teaching gig because I didn't even know Troy University existed. So I'm telling you, it's a long lifespan, and not to get discouraged, but I understand how it can be discouraging if you have to be a temporary barista, whatever you have to do to earn some money to pay the rent. But always, always make time, even if it's your sketchbook and just some doodles, but to find your art community, because then you'll find your opportunities. And one thing in contemporary art, it is a multidisciplinary arena where artists collaborate with performers and events, and people want to come experience events. They get sick of looking at their screens. They want to come into an environment that's submersive and full of creativity. Whether it's a Troyapalooza event we just had and you get to make a costume and performers get to perform. So you're using your creative juices to interface with as many different kinds of creatives. And it can be from the writing world and performing world as well. I hope I tied that all together.
That was wonderful, thank you.
Good.
I have a question.
Sure, Carrie.
Right. So as an art educator and a working artist, how has it been to show your artwork, like have your artwork unveiled with the students? Because we had a discussion about this because they don't normally see what you do
Yeah.
often. Yeah.
I just want to know I was the real deal. Yeah. So funny thing. Years ago when I first started, because I've been a beekeeper for like 12 years, and I remember in the newness of social media, I would post a lot of pictures of myself as a beekeeper. And I remember a student come to class one day, and they saw my social media feed with me like in my beekeeping suit, and he said to me, "Yeah, you're the real deal. You really keep bees and like wear a suit." And I'm like, yeah. So I think for all of us in education, no matter what topic we're teaching, you know, it could be philosophy, it could be writing, journalism like Sherry does, it's important for the students to know we practice what we preach. So to have this environment that's still new to me, okay? I realize we've had the IAC 3 or 4 years, I know. But it's nice to have a space where we can all come together like this and have students know that they're going to be okay in the long run, even if right now they're a barista, right, and a student. It all works itself out. You just have to keep at it, and you're going to do lots of different things in your life, you know. Many people are going to have a family. Trust me, the minute you have kids, that's the #1 job. But you can do fun art projects with your kids. But it's just a whole journey or path. It's not one particular thing.
Any more questions?
That's it.
No?
Anna!
So you talked about like taking a walk every day and taking pictures of the sky as like part of a ritual that you do, like to stay in your art practice. Are there any other, like, can you talk about any other rituals that you like daily, weekly?
Yeah, that is a great question. We still get an analog newspaper. It's the Wall Street Journal, and the reason I say that is my husband does that to me on purpose, because we're a house divided. But not over football. I'm a New York Times gal. Okay, thanks, Sherry. I knew you knew. So to answer that question, I collect images that I'm attracted to, and I cut them out of the newspaper. I coat them with Mod Podge. I know that sounds silly, but you can't collage with newspaper. You have to preserve it because it's magazines work better because they're coated stock. And so another ritual that I promised myself I would stop doing because I have boxes full of pictures. The problem with collage, it's addictive. Collecting images is addictive. And then I have to spend time remembering what kind of pictures where. So I have a folder that says cosmos. I have a folder that says hands. A folder that says circles. I'm not joking. Any student that's had me, they know I'm organized in the physical world. And another ritual, and this brings me to Dana. When I had my show in 2020, somehow I got, okay, so this idea of telling on, I came up with the phrase telling on myself. I didn't know what that meant. A role of a curator is to help an artist along the way. There's a lot of different roles they play. But what Dana helped me understand, yes, I'm a Southerner now. I know none of you buy into that, hearing me, I get that. But the idea of storytelling, when I came up with the phrase telling on myself, because I must have had 20 different ideas for what to name a show, and I had no clue, because basically my untitled show. I didn't really care about the title, and I have no clue where the phrase telling on myself came from. But then we started to explore the idea of storytelling. So then I started to keep a journal, and I started to pretend I was a writer. And the reason I'm saying pretend, writing, you have to be a very disciplined person every day, just like drawing or painting. But I started to write. I love to read. It was hard in college, again, time, but reading informs a lot of inspiration. And I would just write things like the scent of jasmine in the spring morning air. No, it got better as I got going. You know, damn you sun, you blocked the stars, stuff. So it started to be, for a couple years there, a real steady stream, because we would have write night, and part of the challenge I set for myself was to tell stories during telling on myself. And I've fallen a little out of that practice, but I think finding writing that inspires you to do a little bit of reading every day. I read every day, but that's not always inspirational. I'm very particular about what media I let in now, right? So if I can't listen to NPR that day, I have to listen to Coast to Coast and Alien Talk. I'm not, or it's just some kind of jazz. You see what I mean? So find something that can run in the background, but it keeps you steady. And I found just quiet time in the morning, and nothing's going on yet in the day. It's still a little dark. The sun's coming up. I found writing a few sentences each day. And what I found is I ended up writing a story about my childhood. And as you have time to yourself, there might be episodes, memories from childhood that you build a narrative on. And I could see you in your own work, this whole body of work that illustrates that. Because I know you think along those lines about nature, inspiration, and you can find ways to put that maybe in a daily sketchbook, or just have a spot somewhere in your house that is only your spot, and that you can do a little something every day. So these rituals, I think, have become more important as I'm older. I think it's hard in a frenzied student's life because you have to turn things on and off so much.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for coming. Let's give a big round of applause.